Thank you very much, Cindy. It's great to be back. I was on a panel in this conference during my first year at Wharton, and it was truly one of the highlights of my whole time here. And all the kudos to the undergrads who organized this, and Michelle and Wasabi. It's a great time. So thanks for being here. And Pauline, it's really great to have you. You are someone that I think personally, with the work I've done, have been following since you got to the NWSL, and in general, just the women's sports landscape in this league is really setting the tone for this new ecosystem of sports and emerging sports that's becoming a real force in our not just domestically but also globally. So I think I want to start with just getting to know more about what the CFO means, not just at the NWSL but a sports league in general, because I think a lot of people don't fully know the nuance of what that is, and especially at an emerging growth entrepreneurial league like the NWSL. So if you could just speak about that.
Yeah, sure. So maybe I'll take you guys a little bit through a journey of my career. Before I worked at Nike, as Cindy mentioned, I grew up in Silicon Valley. And so back in the days when eBay actually was a startup. I think that everybody's like, oh, that's such a big company. No, actually, we used to, the whole finance department could sit around a table and grab dinner after working until all hours of the evening. But, so kind of graduated from Silicon Valley and worked at Nike for a while. And while I was working at Nike, I would say that this opportunity to work at the National Women's Soccer League came up. And I was so excited about the opportunity to be a part of women's sports, to be part of this growth trajectory, exactly what you were saying, this emerging league that's just been on fire. And what was exciting to me was not just within the role of CFO, really what I have found is that I've been able to take kind of the merging between my entrepreneurial background, kind of working at startups and working at real scrappy places where you had to build everything from the ground up. And then being able to also then take, I would say, more of my corporate experience where I have seen what great looks like. I mean, my last job was managing a $52 billion investment, our portfolio of revenue that we were working with at Nike. And then kind of moving to the league and understanding, okay, I know where we're at in this cycle of growth, and I know where we need to be. I know that's where great is, but I also know that the work that it needs to take for us to be a little bit more scrappy, a little bit more entrepreneurial, and how we're going to be growing through those phases. So I'd say that my experiences, I've been very fortunate to have had some of that to inform what it's like to be a CFO at a sports league. With that said, I didn't necessarily know what I was walking into. It has been fascinating and I would say crazy but good. The role of CFO in a sports league is a very unique role in that there aren't that many sports leagues and there aren't that many CFOs of sports leagues. And so we have a group chat.
Love it.
Yeah. We have a little, hey guys, does anybody know what to do with this tax law in Washington? I mean, literally, because we are the only ones who can ask each other what the heck this is all meaning. And you know what I'm so thankful about is that these CFOs at the sports leagues, again, because the NWSL is relatively early in our growth cycle, is that they understand where I'm coming from and they've been through this. And so the lessons they've learned, the mistakes that they've made, everything they want to share with me as the CFO of the NWSL, because they also believe in the growth of women's sports and want to support us. So I think I've been really lucky in that way, but it definitely has been an interesting journey so far. Been with the league for just almost a year and a half and been having some amazing experiences there.
That's amazing. I think we'd all love to hear more about this text thread and see some of the memes and funny. Yeah, because it is. I mean, it's the CFO at lots of teams, and it's definitely a role you see at more of a property level for sure. Connected to the revenue streams of stadiums and ticket sales and things like that. So at the league level, it really is, as you said, there's more arbitrary kind of centralized processes and things to figure out that makes it an incredibly challenging but puzzle that I think these leagues definitely are leaning into more. Just sticking on that a little bit and being at Wharton and understanding kind of what that balance you take between the short term, like the NWSL is, I think more than any league, are really driving themselves on this long-term vision, and that's spread across the 16 teams and incredible ownership groups who all have a lot of ideas about what they want moving into the next 5-10 years plus. But ultimately, like, your position is to get people to focus on the day-to-day and to say, wait a second, how can we we want to achieve that growth, sure, and those visions, but it's really important that we learn from our mistakes, iterate right now, and try to drive down on some of these metrics and numbers on the P&L, because a lot of these leagues have, especially in the emerging space, have come and gone and folded because of poor revenue mismanagement or not looking at KPIs enough. So how do you balance that short term with this incredible vision and these owners with lots of capital throwing money everywhere?
I like the way you think that we've got money throwing around.
The owners are they're like look at some of these expansion fees and it's just growing, and there's capital out there to
and 100%
well running. So
no, 100%, and I mean it's actually very top of mind for me right now. We just got out of our long-range planning cycle, and I think one of the things that has been, maybe just to take a step back in terms of going back to the role of CFO, is that I would say that within the trajectory, I mean, I think this is pretty true at startups as well, but there's a trajectory of the role of CFO that kind of starts out with, first, we need to make sure that we've got, more of I would say a controlling function, where you need to make sure you've got the right processes in place, that you've got the right ERP systems, that you've got all of your ducks in a row, and that you're staying in compliance with GAAP. So there's probably a little bit more of that infrastructure that needs to be in place in the very early stages as a company is building up. And then, as I would say, the league has grown and as companies grow, more of the financial planning analysis, so more of that FP&A function now kind of leans into, okay, not only now we have all of our systems in place, we actually know what's the revenue that we're generating, we know what's on our balance sheet, we know how to manage cash flow. Now all of a sudden you start to think about, how do we start to direct the financials of the organization, of the company? Where is it that we're taking the company to? And this is where a little bit more, I would say, of my FP&A background has been super helpful, in that the first thing I did when we started at the league, my very first thing that I walked into is I said, okay, we are going to do a proper annual operating plan. And I said, it's great that you think that that's just the budget, but it's not. An annual operating plan is really starting off with the strategy, taking that, and then making sure that we understand what do we want to accomplish operationally, and then how does that tie to the resourcing and the financials that we have to drive those operational outcomes, so that we can measure ourselves against that. And so when you identify the right KPIs, you know the right metrics that you're gearing yourselves against, you know what you need in order to drive growth, and then you have the budget to support those objectives. That's really what the role of the CFO is in that space. Yeah. And then once that's kind of in place, when you're talking about, and again, when you're talking about measuring kind of short-term and long-term growth, this year we really now, and I say just right now, we just finished our long-range planning, and that was really around setting the goal and the vision, again, both operationally, both like looking at our vision and then looking at our financials, that was really for our 3-year financial projections. And at the same time, we are also driving the 10-year plan for the National Women's Soccer League. So all these planning and all these things are really important for us, just infrastructure fundamentals. But then when we look at like now how actually do we evaluate the investments that we need to make for both short-term and long-term, one of the filters that I always put everything through is this investment, is this project, is what we want to put money into, is this going to be something that supports our longer term vision? Is this something that's going to give us the growth in enterprise value that we're looking for? Like, sure, you can talk about like ROIs and you can measure all these things, but really what we have to put the filter through is that when we're looking at that longer term growth, is that how we're going to achieve it? And so I think most of you, if you guys know like sports leagues and how financials work, a large percentage of revenue for sports leagues does come through the media revenue, broadcast revenue. And so with that said, one of the filters that we put through as we think about, what is our next growth going to be for the National Women's Soccer League is really around how do we look at that 2028 media deal? How do we look at like the ways that we're moving ourselves to a space that will allow us to maximize that opportunity for us?
Yeah, totally. I mean, there's so much conversation, and the financials show that these media deals are the buoys for so many leagues. And the NWSL, I mean, their renegotiation, I believe, 2024. I mean, it was 40 times the previous one.
Yes.
So there's this sort of like pegging, benchmarking of like, oh my God, like we have to now, just basic human instinct will want more than that. But you see sometimes leagues get too hyper focused on that as their sole goal, and you totally can understand why. But with NWSL, and I think the way the commissioner Berman and you guys are sort of positioning yourself, it's of course yes, that 2028 media deal is critical, but that's not everything. Like we need to also, and this sort of leads to the next, where I think you guys stand out very uniquely is just the model of putting a lot of freedom and basically, I mean, with the way that things are structured, duty on the ownership groups and their capital to invest in their teams, build the infrastructure around them, provide better resources for athletes to sort of, instead of just the league controlling that, giving that power to the other 16 to say like, look, we'll focus on the commercial part of it, the media part of it, the centralized part of it, but we really also need you guys to execute both in the short term and beyond this media deal to provide that longevity. So can you talk a little bit about just like the way the ownership sort of structure works and how it interacts with you, and and we can talk about the CBA too and how that then also skews to a lot of player first mentality, but it's a really interesting.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think as I'm sure, I don't know how many of you guys are NWSL fans or soccer fans, but as the league has grown, we've really seen some different ownership teams coming in, investing in our clubs, and we've had some amazing growth and valuation of our clubs. And as we've seen that, there also alongside with that has been, I would say, a really deliberate investment plan by these owners, looking at everything from like kind of what you're saying, like making sure that they are continuing to invest in their players, and by investing in players, meaning like making sure that we're having, women's teams facilities, training facilities, and having stadiums, and like owning these pieces that really are setting the bar for what it means to have a women's sports league, to operate a women's sports team. I think the stat was, like $1 billion has been invested in women's facilities across the WNBA, the NWSL, and like what an amazing statistic that is to say that there's so much desire to make sure that we are actually giving our women players, our women athletes, the training facilities, and being able to play it at the level and the caliber that they operate in and what they deserve as professional athletes. So this is something that I feel very passionately about, because it is something that will continue to drive success in the league, in our growth. It will continue to be the way that we attract amazing players from all over the world to play for the league. And that is important overall, to make our product, which is the beautiful game of soccer, making sure that that is the focus. And so it's not always just about chasing the next media deal. It's not always just about how much sponsors revenue can you get after. It's really around making sure that we've got a holistic view of what we're driving for the growth of the league in all aspects, because if you don't have all these pieces together, you really can't. Again, we look at this as the holistic value of the league. And again, we look at both the success of the players and of the teams and of the league as one big ecosystem that we're looking to optimize and maximize.
Yeah, that's great. I won't pretend I'm a lawyer, or I won't want to tiptoe into too much, because but if anyone, I encourage people to look into the CBA of this recent CBA that was signed with NWSL, and it's really fascinating. It kind of flips the model of traditional sports leagues in the U.S. on its head. There's so much different nuances there. There's no draft now. Players, they can't be traded without consent. The housing resource, the benchmarks they're given for standards of living, of maternity leave, of healthcare, career services, mental health. It's truly doing something. And I think, as a former athlete myself, and then representing a lot of athletes across many different sports, it's even at the highest level in the NFL, you don't see the athlete being prioritized in a way that the NWSL is doing it. And I think it's, it definitely takes some guts and sort of challenges to lean into, just because every ownership group has to get on board. And as the CFO, you're monitoring a lot of different ways people are going about this. But ultimately, if the NWSL wants to, correct me if I'm wrong, be the best league in the world with the best players, the best fan experience, the global powerhouse that U.S. women's soccer has sort of been able to have this legacy of, this seems to be the model that can take them into the horizon. So
definitely. What I would say about the CBA is that, very fortunate, Commissioner Berman has had a vision for what can we do for the league? What can we do to really help the players and really drive something that is an incredible, like you said, kind of shifting things around and disrupting what is normal for leagues in the United States. So by the elimination of the draft and allowing players to be able to choose where do I want to play as opposed to getting drafted somewhere, was a very just a mind-blowing. And again, it's not that it's in Europe, or everywhere else around the globe. This is actually a little bit standard, where United States, all of our leagues, do have this draft. But to give the control back to the players, and to give them the option and the ability to choose where they play, to potentially even be able to say, I own my destiny, that power and control back to the players is so amazing for them. And also, it makes all of our teams have to work extra hard to court those players. So now, if you want someone to come play for you, you better be investing in your facilities. You'd better be making sure that this first team environment is absolutely where they're going to want to be, and making sure that they are going to be happy and they will choose you. So it's just as much of the athletes and our players choosing their clubs as much as the clubs choosing these players. And so that relationship has been, again, game-changing. And we actually just announced that we're going to have our first combine in December, so exciting way to showcase and to demonstrate the talent that's out there, and allowing our clubs to be able to now see, like, here's who we want to pull into our teams, here's who we're going to pick.
Yeah. I mean, you're totally right. Like the shifting of it, it signals a lot of what I think. Maybe like the NFL, these big teams, maybe they look similar when they first got going, because of course nobody in the sports, you don't have a job. Like the players are the only reason that people like you or people like myself have a job in it. So of course they have to be running the ship. But it's very fascinating. And I remember having a conversation with a NWSL player who she wanted to move from the biggest market team with, I mean, if you look at where it was and so where it was heading, like, and she wanted to move to the smallest market team because that team had incredible turf. They had incredible coaching. They were putting in a new weight room, and she was willing to say, like, at the end of the day, like, I've gone this far investing in my career. Like, sure, playing with more fans in the crowd, that definitely is something I want to do. But like, I also need to stay healthier. I also, like, I need a coach that's going to understand me better and give me another. So it just, that ability is fascinating. And it gives these clubs in smaller places, I think Kansas City, we can use that as an example, as like they can build this incredible soccer empire because and attract the best players in the world because of the investments that they're making in them. So I guess on that, like, where do you see, like, what's the biggest sort of drive? I mean, there's plenty, but that you are encouraging the clubs to invest in, like facilities, player outcome, that what is sort of, I guess, the target that you're aiming for before 2028? Yeah,
no, I do think that continued investment in infrastructure is something that we've been really, really focusing on from the league level, from the perspective of encouraging. I mean, obviously, this is not a league investment. Right. This is more of what the clubs have to invest in. And so continuing to reinforce the importance of that and making sure that we are, again, providing that first team environment that is so helpful for our players. And I would say that, like, also just from a support structure perspective, being like invested in the community, being a part of that community through these investments that they're making is just really building a bigger ecosystem. A little bit how you just described is, while maybe Kansas City is investing in these infrastructure and facilities, that in return will yield better players coming in, more audiences coming in, and with that then the related halo effect of what are the other investments that they're making in the area? What are the other business opportunities that this will continue to drive and continue to expand in the community? It is just like a never-ending cycle of goodness that comes from all of this. And so it starts first, though, with having committed owners who really believe in that vision that we've been talking about. They have to believe that this is all going to be just a short-term investment that we can make that will allow us to have longer-term growth. And it's a bet that they have to be willing to take, but it's all backed by, the growth that we actually are seeing now within the league.
Yeah, and then I think like another part of the ecosystem who's betting on the NWSL and showing up is the commercial marketplace, the partnership world, brands. I think the overall portfolio value of the NWSL has quadrupled since 2021, 2022. And it's a very, selling brand partnerships in women's sports has become an incredible opportunity in an incredibly undervalued asset class. And, many people are calling it one of the biggest, business and competence in sports in the last few decades of not realizing the opportunity there because it is showing to pay off a lot. So can you speak to a little bit about how you work in the commercial place, so with partners, brands, and how you kind of look to build that portfolio at the league level? and trickling into your clubs?
Yeah, no, I think so. There are sponsorships that happen at the national level, and so those are really where I, as the CFO, I get to get visibility, and definitely are making sure that that's part of the league revenue growth. And then obviously all of our clubs have their market sponsorships, and that is what you'll see at front of kit. That's what you're going to see as, potentially even like Kansas City, like their stadium sponsorship. So all those things are more club related. And what I would say at the league level, what we've been really focused on, and I think what Commissioner Berman has done a really great job about, is being really deliberate about finding the right sponsors and finding the sponsors who share in the vision of what we are doing at the league. And it's not just about a transactional moment, but it's about how do they also see reaching audiences that we care about also, or expanding our audience to other individuals or other consumers who could be really interesting partners for the NWSL. And so as we've just announced, I think, gosh, I can't even remember, there's like this whole list we've just done with Elf, challenger brands like Elf and Bobby. We also have some big, like Delta we just announced Delta, and they just had their 100th year anniversary, and with Canon, and all these great sponsors that we've started to partner with. And all of these brands have been really excited to work with us because they see that we're not just, and I'm going to say this because it's going to sound really terrible, but this isn't a donation to we're really excited about. No. Yeah. They also demand results. They also are looking at their valuations of what they are doing in sponsorship relative to what we in the league can deliver. And that is why we are getting these partners, is because they know that we can deliver, they know our audiences. And that is so powerful, that combination of being able to find, again, the right sponsors who are interested in what the league is doing, but also we as the league being able to deliver what these sponsors want. That's just, magic right there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I haven't seen some of the back and forth between brands and the NWSL and different soccer teams, the engagement numbers and the ROI that are on these sponsorships. It's sometimes it's on average double than what you're seeing on average in men's sports in different categories. It's very, as you said, it's not a donation. It's proving to be very, very fruitful, and also a lot of brands are tent-pulling a lot of their entire sports marketing budgets into women's sports, getting into sports for the first time and doing it via the NWSL and similar leagues. I guess just probably also not my strength, but innovation and sort of this new stages of AI and transformation among league offices, and how that's going to change your day to day and how you operate. And obviously coming from Silicon Valley and Nike, who embraced a lot of this, what's that look like for you?
Yeah, I think one of the things, AI obviously is in almost every aspect of the sports industry. Everything from investments in technology for on-field technology and VAR, and just having the opportunity to embed it there. But also, again, maybe a little bit less sexy, but all of you guys are from Wharton, so this is great. The actual, the investments in what we can do within our financials, our reporting systems. We are a lean league, right? And we really are. We just added 2 new teams that are going to start playing in 2026, and so with that, the explosion of what we're seeing from now more invoices, more payroll, more teams to have to manage, all of that. We could also similarly have had an explosion in headcount and in growth in that space. But through investments in technology and through investments in AI, if you are ever a CFO and you're going to be leading companies and you're going to be going in and setting up these infrastructures, like now is the time to really learn about what AI can do for you and how you can use that to make your operations more efficient, more lean, and actually take away a lot of the manual work that you might have had to do before there was AI. And so I would say in that way, I think that that's where it's really helpful. And then even now, on even things like the ticketing side, so revenue, and really helping to optimize, how do we help clubs understand how to sell tickets and how does that work? All these things are just, I don't even say AI investments anymore because it's so embedded in every single aspect that you do, and so it's more about just staying current and recognizing where can you embed these opportunities and where can you align technology and AI and the latest and greatest and all of that into what you do every single day. I mean, literally every single day.
Yeah, because sports moves so. The thing I see is everything's just moving so fast. You're like, yeah, sure, that could be helpful, but by the time it becomes the implementing and hiring for it or learning, it becomes okay, next thing. But I want to leave room for questions, but I think just a good, just being at Wharton and a lot of students here wanting to work in sports, what is the biggest piece? It's asked all the time, but I think, again, a CFO, it's something very relatable to a lot of different places these students are going or have been. They want to get into sports, they have a sort of background in maybe finance or consulting. What is the biggest piece of advice you can give towards that transition?
Yeah, what I would say maybe more so than anything, I think that all of you obviously have the skill set to be able to be a CFO, at clubs, at leagues, teams in the sports industry. But I think that what really sets apart the people who succeed in the sports industry is it's about having passion for sports. I personally have 2 daughters, middle schooler and a college-age student. And for me, the reason I chose this role was because I saw, as my children were growing up, what sports did for them, the confidence it gave them, the way that it taught them the lessons about working hard and being able to translate that into results, to be able to advocate for yourself to the coach on why am I not getting more minutes. All these lessons that you learn from sports, these are so critical and so important. And so my move from big giant corporation of Nike into the NWSL was because I believe in the vision, I believe in the passion. I am such a strong advocate of women's sports, and I want to be part of this movement. I want to be part of this growth, and such a pivotal moment now in women's sports. This is the time to take advantage of it, and so I am so lucky to be able to participate here in this position, leading finance at the NWSL.
That's great. I think we have time. Let's question Cindy. Do you want to? Are we doing a? No, we can probably.
We'll just do a live Q&A. So raise your hand if you have a question.
I'm what?
Right over there in the front.
Hi, Pauline. Super happy to have you here. My name is Aditya. I'm a freshman here at Wharton, and I'm actually from Kansas City. So
Oh, nice.
NWSL pretty close to home. And my question refers kind of to CPKC as well. So Chris and Angie funded basically the majority of the creation of CPKC. For other teams in the NWSL, what do you think is the financial viability of kind of funding that if the owners don't end up taking the majority of the financing for those?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously we have a couple of teams now who are building stadiums. And I'm sure, as you know, if you've done a little research on stadium builds, a lot of times because of the investment of these stadiums are so beneficial to the communities that they're a part of. There is a lot of financing that comes from, at the city level and supportive that actually gives back to the communities just as much as it does give to the specific sports team or sports team that is trying to build this. And so what I would say is that there are many different models that I've seen that come to life, but a lot of the owners are able to do a lot of the funding and they have the means to do that, but there are also amazing partnerships that they're building with the communities that they are investing in that allows them to have these projects. And again, it gives back, just like I was saying before, it gives back to not just the clubs, but also to the surrounding communities around it. Yeah.
In the middle.
So, player salaries are normally revenue driven, and valuations seem to be very multiple expansion driven, and there is a growing chasm between player salaries and the valuations of teams. So, is it ethical to ask players to cap their salaries when there is no cap to the valuations of teams? And should players get equity to account for this growing disparity?
So the last CBA that was signed just recently that goes out to 2030, there has been baked into that CBA growth in the salary cap for players. And so we do obviously have salary caps for all of the teams. I think your question around, how do players participate in the growth of the league and how do they also share in that? Well, actually, as part of the CBA, we also have a revenue sharing component of that, which is part of the new agreement. And so as the league continues to grow in its revenue, the players actually do, it's not your options from Silicon Valley, but they do participate in the growth of the league through the revenue sharing mechanism that goes and feeds the salary caps for different clubs. And so that is how we continue to ensure that players get a part of that growth. So great question, and that's exactly what the new CBA was meant for. Yeah, I think one of the unique things about the NWSL is that, obviously we are an independent league. So, I think that where there are a lot of other leagues that are combined with the men's teams, we are a standalone independent league, and that is how we operate. I think that is truly an advantage for us in the NWSL because I would say, optimize the value of what we're worth. It's not sharing in a greater, whatever you want to call, great
tenant.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think that is truly an advantage. And I think also one of the advantages that we have in the United States is that we have so much interest in women's sports, so much opportunity from sponsors and looking at that commercial aspect that is very unique and very different, I think, than what you might see around the world. That is such a benefit for us in the United States and for the NWSL. And so that's something that, I think that sets us apart.
And as there's so much potential technology to sort of evaluate, but as CFO, how do you figure out which one is actually worth the financial value? Because you need to invest in brand value and marketing.
Yeah, I think it's a great question because gosh, I don't know how many different like AI emails I get on a like, please do this, do that. I mean, there's everything. They'll AI you all the way all over the place.
AI built by AI.
Yeah, pretty much. But I think there's, I think especially like in the example that you just gave on like content, there definitely is an art and science of what you have to consider. Sure, I maybe as if I were looking at strictly through the lens of being a CFO and saying like, I'm just looking at the numbers and just want to make sure that, if we want to automate content creation, that we should AI all of it. But you also have to recognize that there is a unique value of making sure that your content speaks to its audience in a very specific way. And while there can be leverage in investing in AI that could help, let's say, drive volume in certain ways, I do think that you have to balance making sure that you don't lose your voice, making sure that you don't lose what it is that makes your brand special. And so that is truly something that I encourage the teams as we're looking at AI and looking at what it is that we're automating, making sure that it makes sense for us overall as a league. Because at the end of the day, we're not just running numbers and we're not just transactional business. We're selling a vision, we're selling a dream, and we are part of a bigger, I would say like a bigger vision for women's sports going forward. So that's why it's really important to make sure that you control that narrative.
Is that everything? All right. Well, thank you so much. That was
yeah,
so good to have you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.